Let's dive into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. According to the timeline of the story, the first film is Captain America, which was released in 2011. For those who haven't seen any Marvel movies, now's the time to dive in with me. The story takes place during World War II. In a special military training scene, a strict officer does something unexpected. He pulls the pin from a grenade and throws it into a group of hard-working recruits. The recruits react quickly, fleeing and dropping to the ground. However, one of the thinnest recruits did not hesitate to rush forward and press his body against the grenade. He intends to sacrifice himself to save the lives of his fellow soldiers, but surprisingly, the expected explosion never comes. Under the approving gaze of his female supervisor, the recruit realized that this was just a test by his instructor. This recruit's name is Steve. In the Special Forces, he isn't strong, often ranking near the bottom in every test. He even finishes dead last in a 20-kilometer weighted run. But during this special test, Steve shows extraordinary courage and intelligence. That day, the officer issued a challenge. Whoever can retrieve the flag from the top of the flagpole gets to ride home in Peggy's car. Strong soldiers were eager to try, but the flagpole was cleverly lubricated by the instructor, and no one had succeeded in the last 17 years. Steve, however, had a different kind of smarts. Confidently, he approached the flagpole, pulled out the pin at its base, and let the pole fall over, easily grabbing the flag. His cleverness earned Peggy's admiration and the envy of the others. Despite showing remarkable tactical intelligence in the military, Steve is still seen as an underdog, often bullied by his teammates. They think Steve is just a guy who got in through connections. Steve's health isn't great either. He's been rejected from the draft 5 times and suffers from several chronic illnesses. His interviewers also rated him poorly. Disheartened by yet another rejection from the army, Steve's attention is caught by a recruitment ad in a movie theater, but a man in front of him complains that the ad is too long and starts mocking it.
Hey, you want to shut up?
No matter the size, we'll face any threat.
Steve ends up getting dragged into an alley and beaten up by the man. Though Steve can't match the size and strength of this thug, he never backs down, delivering that iconic line.
I can do this all day.
If it weren't for his friend Bucky showing up in time, things could have ended badly for Steve. Seeing his best friend being drafted, Steve felt both happy for him and sad for himself. Bucky could see how down Steve was feeling, so he invited 2 girls to join them at a tech expo hosted by Howard that evening. Despite Steve's best efforts to charm them, neither girl paid him any attention, leaving Steve feeling even more dejected. Once again, Steve's eyes were drawn to the nearby recruitment ad, and he made up his mind to falsify his information for the 6th time to enlist. However, this time, Steve's fate was about to take a turn. Dr. Erskine, under orders from the government, was tasked with forming a secret unit, and he was on the lookout for soldiers with special potential. The intelligence and selflessness Steve had shown caught Dr. Erskine's eye. He saw the possibility of a super soldier in Steve. So, Erskine made an exception and allowed Steve to pass the enlistment screening. Steve first underwent specialized physical training and was later accompanied by Peggy to an unassuming antique shop. After exchanging a series of coded phrases, they entered a secret chamber inside the shop. What appeared to be an ordinary place was, in fact, concealing a top-secret military laboratory. Steve was selected as the test subject, a decision confirmed under the watchful eyes of military officials. Without hesitation, Steve stripped off his clothes and lay down on a row of advanced experimental equipment. The assistant expertly secured him in place, took out a vial of blue serum, and injected it into Steve's arm.
That was penicillin.
Serum infusion, beginning in 5.
Dr. Erskine began the countdown. The technician nervously pulled the trigger. As the countdown finished, all the super serum was swiftly injected into Steve's body. At that moment,
Now, Mr. Stroud.
Howard decisively shut down the experiment equipment and activated the saturation exposure to the Vita rays. Unable to endure the excruciating pain, Steve let out a howl. Everyone in the lab held their breath in tension.
70, 60. Demon! Demon! Don't! I can do this!
Colonel Peggy firmly ordered the experiment to be stopped, but Steve's voice came from inside the machine, and after hearing it, Howard decided to increase the power of the Vita rays. As the brightness inside the device intensified, the control panels began to overload and short-circuit under the immense strain. When the light finally dimmed, The chamber of the experiment device slowly opened. The moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. The once scrawny young man, Steve, had now transformed into a broad-shouldered, muscular powerhouse. While the room was still basking in the success, a spy hidden in the shadows detonated the viewing platform above. The spy stole the remaining super serum, shot and killed Dr. Erskine, and made a swift escape. The scene immediately descended into chaos. Steve rushed forward to check on Dr. Erskine's injuries, only to find him barely clinging to life. With his last ounce of strength, Erskine pointed to Steve's chest, as if reminding him of the promise he had made.
Whatever happens tomorrow, you must promise me one thing. That you will stay who you are.
Not a perfect soldier, but a good man.
Moments later, Dr. Erskine passed away. Filled with rage, Steve bolted out of the antique shop, just in time to see Colonel Peggy attempting to stop Hines in the street. Seeing that Peggy was about to be run down by Hines, Steve didn't hesitate and dashed forward to rescue his superior officer. Steve sprinted through the city, effortlessly vaulting over 10-foot fences and leaping across moving vehicles. Eventually catching up to Hines's vintage car, Hines, an experienced driver, tried to shake Steve off by swerving violently, but Steve clung on with his powerful arms, refusing to let go. Hines then opened fire on the car's roof, but Steve nimbly dodged the bullets. However, Hines, distracted by shooting, didn't notice the truck ahead, and he crashed head-on into it. Steve was thrown off as well, but he landed firmly on his feet. Hines stepped out and immediately shot at Steve, but Steve quickly used the car door as a shield, blocking the bullets. With no other options, Hines grabbed a nearby civilian and used them as a hostage, threatening Steve not to come any closer, but Steve stayed in pursuit. Desperate, Hines dragged the hostage toward the docks. At the docks, seeing that Steve was still relentless, Hines threw the child hostage into the water, hoping to buy himself more time.
Go get him! I can swim!
But as Steve turned back, he saw Hines had already climbed into a pre-prepared submarine and was swiftly submerging underwater to escape. Without hesitation, Steve dove into the water, and using his swimming skills, he actually caught up with the propeller-driven submarine. With a powerful punch, Steve smashed the submarine's window, forced his way into the cockpit, and dragged Hines out of the water. Steve had hoped to learn the identity of the mastermind from Hines, but Hines chose to commit suicide by taking poison instead.
Cut off one head. 2 more shall take its place.
At this point, Steve did not know that this is the slogan of Hydra organization. Hydra was a secret division of the German Nazis, led by Schmidt, dedicated to creating weapons of mass destruction for Hitler. In a church in Norway, they retrieved Odin's artifact, the Tesseract, from the body of a prophet. Schmidt worked with the mad scientist Zola, attempting to harness the Tesseract's energy for weapon research. During one experiment, Schmidt, impatient for results, pushed the energy to its maximum, causing the reactor to explode and release an unmatched power. However, the military officials scoffed at Schmidt's research, believing his laboratory was a waste of funds. Faced with these oblivious representatives, Schmidt decided to conduct a live demonstration of his new weapon. The military officials, still unaware of the danger, threatened to report him. By this point, Hydra had gained the power to change the course of the war. With one shot from the new weapon, 3 soldiers were instantly vaporized. This power shook Schmidt to his core. It wasn't just a display of a weapon's might, it fed Schmidt's inner desires. To slow the Allies' own weapon research, Schmidt sent Hines to assassinate Dr. Erskine, but this move fully exposed him to the Allied forces. The military quickly responded, deciding to send an elite squad on a mission. Steve also volunteered to join the mission, but Colonel Phillips rejected him.
You're an experiment, you're going to Alamogordo.
However, Senator Brandt saw value in Steve and decided to promote him with a pay raise.
You want to serve your country on the most important battlefield of the war. That's all I want. Then congratulations. You just got promoted.
But instead of joining the front lines, their plan dressed Steve in a flashy costume, far removed from the chaos of war, to play the role of Captain America. Steve, surrounded by beautiful women, recited patriotic lines on stage, promoting war bonds, from Washington to Miami, from lavish theaters to battlefront stages. Day after day, Steve's performances turned him into a circus clown. To the soldiers, Steve was just a clown spouting empty slogans.
Hey, Captain! Say yes!
To the higher-ups, he was nothing more than a money-making machine. Even Steve began to question if he was just a dancing monkey. Luckily, Peggy appeared just in time to help Steve ease the frustration in his heart.
And these are your only two options, a lab rat or a dancing monkey. You were meant for more than this, you know. What?
You know, for the longest time I dreamed about coming overseas and being on the front lines, serving my country. Finally got everything I wanted.
But then Steve learned heartbreaking news: a squadron that had launched a raid on a Hydra base had been completely wiped out, including his best friend Bucky. The military had already decided to abandon them, as their location was too deep behind enemy lines.
Are you planning a rescue mission?
Yeah, it's called winning the war.
But if you know where they are, why not at least...
They're 30 miles behind the lines, through some of the most heavily fortified territory in Europe. We'd lose more men than we'd save. But I don't expect you to understand that because you're a chorus girl.
To save his friend, Steve decided to venture behind enemy lines alone. With Peggy's help, Steve secretly boarded Howard's private plane and flew toward the POW camp. However, the German anti-aircraft system quickly detected them. The plane couldn't continue through the heavy fire, so Steve had no choice but to parachute in. Steve carefully crawled into a supply truck, easily taking out 2 escorting soldiers and slipping into the base. Carrying a massive shield marked with the American flag, Steve boldly marched through the weapons depot and made his way to the prison holding the POWs. Steve easily takes down the guards and opens all the cages in front of the surprised soldiers. But when Steve searched for Bucky, he realized Bucky wasn't among the crowd. It turned out Schmidt had Bucky locked away separately for experimentation. After long bouts of psychological torment, Bucky's body seemed drained of life, his eyes hollow and vacant. Steve quickly freed Bucky. Meanwhile, the soldiers outside the camp broke through the defenses and launched a counterattack. Not only did they seize the Germans' high-tech weapons, but they also used them to destroy the base. From the control room, Schmidt watched it all unfold. Without hesitation, he grabbed the Tesseract and activated the base's self-destruct sequence, determined not to let the equipment fall into Allied hands. As the countdown reached 0, the ammunition depot erupted into a fiery inferno. While searching for an escape route, Steve and Bucky crossed paths with Schmidt, who was attempting to flee. Enemies met face to face, and Steve, filled with rage, threw a powerful punch that split Schmidt's face at the corner of his eye. Schmidt stopped pretending and tore off his human mask, revealing his true identity. Schmidt was Erskine's original test subject. He carried the results of the super serum experiments, which gave him great strength but also fueled the darkness within, making him hideously disfigured. Because Schmidt knew better than anyone the power of the super serum, he was determined to eliminate Dr. Erskine. Now, holding the Tesseract, Schmidt no longer considered someone like Steve a mere mortal, a threat. Schmidt decided to focus on more important matters and chose to flee the scene. Steve, on the other hand, successfully rescued the remaining POWs and returned to the American base with them and the spoils of battle. At the camp, soldiers and generals lined up to welcome Steve.
I'd like to surrender myself for disciplinary action.
That won't be necessary.
The voices that once mocked him had now turned into admiration for his achievements in battle. Steve's fearless sacrifice and unwavering courage earned him the respect of all. In that moment, his name was no longer just a legend. He became a true hero and a symbol of hope. At the grand victory celebration after the war, the soldiers all expressed their admiration for Steve, including Colonel Peggy, who revealed her affection for him. Dressed in a stunning red gown, Peggy's elegant figure had Steve completely captivated.
I might, even when this is all over, go dancing. 0800, Captain.
They promised to be each other's dance partners after the war. Due to his outstanding achievements, Steve was granted the honor of entering the operations command room. There, Steve told the group that the base they destroyed was only one branch of Hydra. To preserve world peace, they had to completely eliminate all Hydra bases. Before heading out on the mission, Howard had a special gift prepared for Steve. It was none other than the iconic shield that would later become famous. This shield became Steve's most reliable tool in combat, helping him and his special team achieve victory after victory on the battlefield. Their combat experience continued to grow, and their skills became more refined. Whether facing hidden foes or powerful enemies, they handled them with ease, as one Hydra base after another fell. The final headquarters became their ultimate target. However, before they could destroy it, The military needed to understand the source of Hydra's technology. The key to this mystery seemed to lie with Dr. Zola. Schmidt's right-hand man. Intercepted radio messages revealed that Dr. Zola was traveling by train to Berlin, so Steve and Bucky decided to infiltrate the train to investigate. However, their mission was detected by Dr. Zola. With Hydra's advanced technology, the firepower of the artillery was overwhelming. Though Steve was able to block the attacks with his powerful shield, Bucky found himself in trouble. Faced with two enemies, Bucky struggled, but Steve arrived just in time to help. Suddenly, another artilleryman appeared. While Steve fought valiantly, Bucky was knocked out of the train car. Steve quickly dispatched the artilleryman and rushed to save Bucky, but the handrail on the car was already coming loose. Just as Steve was about to grab Bucky, the handrail broke, and Bucky plummeted into the valley below. Watching his friend fall, Steve was filled with grief and guilt. But in that moment, Steve realized that rather than being consumed by sorrow, he needed to bravely carry on the mission and fulfill the wishes of those who had fallen. From the captured Dr. Zola, they learned Hydra's secret. All of their technology stemmed from the Tesseract in Schmidt's possession, and they had stockpiled numerous doomsday bombs in their final headquarters. Faced with this urgent situation, Colonel Phillips immediately ordered a swift operation to take down Hydra's last base. Though the mission was incredibly dangerous, Captain America didn't hesitate to head behind enemy lines alone. Captain America jumped on his motorcycle and charged straight toward Hydra's base, with a dozen heavily armed enemies hot on his trail, trying to stop him, but they were quickly taken out one by one as Captain America used his clever tactics to defeat them. When a tank appeared in his path, Captain America skillfully deflected the cannon fire with his shield and successfully destroyed the tank with a missile. He pushed forward, storming into the base, deftly dodging the remaining enemies' attacks. However, in the square, Captain America is in a predicament like no other, with two flamethrower soldiers surrounding him in the center of the square with no way to escape. At that moment, a group of armed soldiers suddenly appeared and surrounded Captain America and escorted him to Red Skull. Both being products of Dr. Erskine's experiments, Red Skull arrogantly taunted and attacked Steve, unable to understand why Dr. Erskine had chosen someone like him. But all of this was part of Captain America's plan. While Red Skull was getting carried away, Steve's reinforcements appeared from all sides, quickly taking down the enemies on the scene. Sensing the tide turning against him, Red Skull quickly fled. Meanwhile, outside the base, Peggy led her forces to launch an attack. Seeing his defeat, Red Skull hurriedly boarded a plane and activated the Tesseract to power the energy core and the engines. He had already loaded the doomsday weapons onto the plane. Captain America fought his way through the chaos of the battlefield, racing toward the roaring bomber. But no matter how fast Captain America's legs could run, he couldn't keep up with the speed of the plane. Just as Captain America was feeling hopeless, Phillips and Peggy arrived in a speeding vehicle. Phillips slammed the gas pedal, but the distance between them and the plane continued to grow. At the critical moment, Phillips decisively activated the nitrous boost, and the powerful thrust caused the vehicle to surge forward. Captain America stood up, ready to board the plane. By then, the car had reached directly below the aircraft. Captain America leaped up and grabbed onto the landing gear, climbing his way inside. In front of him were several bombers, each marked with the name of a city. Just as Captain America was trying to make sense of it, the soldiers began boarding the cockpits. He tried to intervene, but another soldier tackled him to the ground, causing his shield to fall to the side. The pilot jumped out of the cockpit and took Captain America off the ground with him. In the mid-air struggle, Captain America skillfully regained control. He opened the door and threw the pilot out, then quickly got into the plane and steered it back into the bomber. Captain America retrieved his shield and silently entered the control room. However, the large room was completely empty. Out of nowhere, Red Skull launched a surprise attack, but Captain America reacted quickly, blocking it with his shield. What followed was an intense battle, as the two exchanged punches and kicks. Both had been injected with the super serum, so their strength was evenly matched. In the heat of the fight, Captain America accidentally pushed Red Skull against the control lever, causing the plane to suddenly nosedive. The two continued their fight in the weightlessness of the plummeting plane. As the aircraft neared its impending crash, Red Skull kicked Captain America aside and activated the autopilot. He pulled out an energy gun, ready to shoot Captain America, but Red Skull's aim was terrible, and not only did he miss Captain America, but he was also struck by the shield, damaging the energy controller behind him. The Tesseract then tumbled out of its containment. Seeing this, Red Skull realized his plan had failed. He attempted to escape with the Tesseract. However, the out-of-control Tesseract suddenly unleashed a powerful surge of energy, burning Red Skull's arm and teleporting him into an unknown part of the universe. As the energy dissipated, the Tesseract melted through the deck and plunged into the ocean below. The battle ended with the disappearance of Red Skull and the loss of the Tesseract. At this moment, Steve faced an even more urgent challenge. The plane was on a direct course for New York City. The bombs aboard had the power to level the entire city. Countless times, Peggy urgently commanded Steve to change course and find a safe place to land. However, with the Tesseract's energy depleted, the plane could no longer steer or make an emergency landing. To protect the millions of citizens in New York, Steve decided to steer the plane toward an uninhabited area. He placed Peggy's photo within reach to calm his nerves. With a firm grip on the controls, Steve guided the plane into a sharp descent toward the glaciers below. As the radio signal cut out, Peggy realized what Steve's fate would be. On the vast, icy expanse, the plane finally plunged into the ocean and disappeared beneath the waves. With the Allies' total victory, World War II finally came to an end. Peggy held Steve's discharge file, silently thinking about the dance they had promised each other. But the moment they had waited for never came. Time passed like the wind, and when Steve awoke again, he found himself in a world completely unfamiliar to him. Nick Fury, the director of SHIELD, informed Steve that he had been asleep for over 70 years. So, is Peggy still alive? Can the promise of his dance with Peggy still be fulfilled? The movie ends here. Marvel fans, head over to my page for more exciting content. There's plenty more to explore.